And welcome back to the show where we talk about movies and other such things, occasionally video games, occasionally politics, but not really politics because that sucks. And then sometimes we talk about expletives such as Waffle House and other things that follow Waffle House. And the only reason you're going to be able to get that is if you were here 2 minutes before this podcast began, which is not the case for anyone. Someone's calling me as we started this thing. Is this going to be a trend? What is this? Hold up. Hey, man, just want to give you a quick heads up before you say anything. I want to let you know that you interrupted me while we were doing the podcast as we started the podcast, and as a punishment, you are now on the podcast, and you were in front of the mic, so be wary of what you say, because all of this will be put online, and if you think I won't do it, you're going to be disappointed.
And to be fair, we just started.
And we just started, yeah. So
he hasn't...
My bad. All right, go back to the podcast, man.
Yep, all right. Say bye to the audience.
Bye-bye.
There you go. This has happened twice in 2 weeks.
Yep.
This has never happened any times beforehand. This is just a continuous thing that shouldn't happen, but it's happened anyway.
I think you are purposefully trying not to introduce your guests, and so you're having people call on purpose.
That might be the case. Maybe I just secretly hate them and just don't want to talk to them, and then this is the way of me getting out of talking with them.
With your guests?
Yeah, with my guests. But then I have to immediately go back to talking with them.
Yeah, it's not working.
No, it's not working. It's not a good idea.
Not a well thought out plan.
It's not. No, it's a terrible plan. Anyway, I got Jerry Hames on the podcast today.
Hello.
Thank you for coming aboard this show, my dude. It's been a long time coming, entirely because I've canceled on you a few times. So
just once.
Just once. Well, we'll see. Yeah, we'll say. Yeah, it's better than a few times.
Yeah.
Yeah. But we're talking movies, right? We're talking modern movie classics. So I want to clarify when I say modern movie classics. Here's what I mean when I say modern movie classics. Modern movie classics are specified in categories of it has to come out between like the years of 2010 and 2022, current year.
For young people.
So I'm not going to take in consideration certain movie classics like The Dark Knight or The Social Network, a lot of movies that a lot of people would consider to be obvious modern movie classics. And so I'm going to take in consideration a lot more recent movies, and a lot more recent movies that would be considered modern movie classics. But modern movie classics are essentially categorized into two areas: movies that technically revolutionized things in film or are distinct in areas where they are very individual in what they did with either their technology, what they did with storytelling, or anything like that in filmmaking, or they're just movies that people remember for one reason or another, and they continue to be popular and talked about nowadays. Those are the reasons I would consider to be modern movie classics. So, with that distinction in mind, the reason why I wanted to do this podcast in the first place is because I went and go saw. It's the most Texan thing I've ever said in my life.
Yeah.
I went and go saw the movie Top Gun Maverick. And,
that was a good movie.
Yeah, let's talk about that for a quick second before we get on those modern movie classics. Sure. That's one of the movies that I would consider to be a modern movie classic, or at least in the years to come, I would imagine would be. And the reason I'm saying that is because obviously I love the movie. Obviously, the movie's fantastic, and I've seen it multiple times now, and I still love it. And it's one of the movies that I can walk out and say that I feel better having seen the movie than when I went in originally. Sometimes I walk out of the theater feeling exhausted. I walk out of the movie feeling giddy. And I think it's one of those movies where the simplicity of the movie really works in its favor. And it's just one of those movies you can see over and over and over again. And then just the simplicity in how it's made. Not the simplicity in how it's made.
It wasn't made simply.
Not simplicity how it's made, but how it's structured, the story of the movie.
Well, it's so familiar. And I'm very conflicted about Top Gun Maverick because it seemed... first of all, it was good.
Yes.
But it's the whole time, from the opening note of music to the end, it reminded me of the first Top Gun.
Yes.
Right? The music is the same, the structure is the same, the airplanes are different, but it's like the director understood what made Top Gun.
Yeah.
And then they just made it better in almost every way. And so it's good, but it's not original. But it's good. I go back and forth on that. And so I'm still conflicted on whether it's a classic. But I will agree that it's good, and I want to see it again. And I came out of the movie thinking, I'm going to go fly. And there was an old couple behind me as we were leaving the theater.
Yeah.
And she turned to her husband and said, "You want to go get your pilot's license now?" And I'm thinking, yeah, they've got it right. I'm going to go fly when I get home. So,
I do think it's one of those movies that will inspire people. Like, inspire people to do one of two things. Like, be a filmmaker. Because I feel like this is one of those movies that inspires other people who enjoy movies, love movies, in the art of filmmaking. Because I feel like because I'm a filmmaker, but if I see this kind of movie, I feel like this would be one of those movies when you see when you're younger and say, I want to make movies like that. I want to make a movie that's that enjoyable, that's that entertaining on the screen one day. That's one of those movies that would inspire you. But at the same time, like I do think that people would be inspired to do some of those things potentially for the future, like go fly or be a pilot or join the Navy or stuff like that. There's actually a conversation I had with someone recently who, despite enjoying the technicality of the film, the way it was made, we really got into a deep conversation and a long conversation and an unnecessarily deep conversation about this movie is what he was getting into. And if you're watching this, I am going to trash you. I apologize. It is like this movie, in and of its core, is essentially telling people or trying to inspire people to join war, and war is bad. And it essentially went into the whole ideal of war and what war means, and that this is actually secretly a war movie, and that the enemy in the movie is a whole allegory for certain things and whatever. And we got into a whole deep, long conversation that was really unnecessary, and some would say isn't necessary to bring up right now, but I wanted to bring it up to trash that person. But I also wanted to bring it up just because it's interesting that it was brought up to begin with.
I don't remember it being like extremely pro-war.
It's not.
I mean, it's like, this is a story, and we're going to tell the story, and this is what they do. This is what they prepare for.
Yeah,
right? It's not pro-war. War is great, or war is terrible, or anything. It's just, this is kind of a fact of life. So I don't.
A movie can be enjoyable and fun, and also just be those things.
Yeah.
So again, that's one of the reasons why I enjoyed the film, because it is very simplistic in its delivery. Execution, obviously, it's not. It's such a fantastically technological achievement. The fact that you put a freaking IMAX camera on a plane and said, okay, roll it on the actors. It's so freaking cool. And the fact that Tom Cruise did those things is amazing.
Yes.
But yeah, well, I mean, what are the reasons why you would consider that thing to be like? It is very similar to the old Top Gun.
It's very similar to the old Top. There's the scene where nobody's wearing shirts playing a sport.
Yeah,
it's not volleyball. But,
it's not.
But it's there. I think that scene they improved on. When I first came out of it, I thought this is just like Top Gun, but it doesn't stand on its own. It needs the original Top Gun.
Yeah.
And then I watched Top Gun again yesterday, and I don't think so, right? Because in the first Top Gun, there's the whole thing with his dad.
Right.
Right. His dad was great, but you never meet him, and there's some trauma or something there that he's trying to overcome, something that just bothers him. And that's kind of the same thing you get with Goose in the second movie. Right. There is this trauma, and you know more about it having seen the first Top Gun. But there's probably more information about the Goose thing in Maverick than there is in the original.
There is.
About his dad. And so I watched Top Gun yesterday. I was like, okay, I can take my opinion on that back. I think Maverick could stand on its own without the original Top Gun.
Yeah.
And stylistically, it all seems very similar, but it's like they cranked it up to 11.
Yeah.
All of the flight scenes, the combat scenes, all of that, there's just so much more adrenaline. Your heart's pumping, and you're just you kind of gripping your seat. It's a lot of fun to watch.
And again, like the whole behind the scenes thing is its own thing. The achievements that Tom Cruise did and the director did with this movie is fantastic.
there's no reliance on CG. They actually had to feel them, and these are the actual reactions that they have. And it just makes a better experience, I think.
I mean, to see someone on screen feeling the full force of the G's on them when they're climbing on a jet going however fast that jet is going, you can see that on their face. And it feels real, and the background, obviously, they're in a jet and everything that's experiencing. It's a different feeling that you would not get otherwise. And you definitely, you either subconsciously feel that experience differently in your head, or you just kind of acknowledge that in real life. Because subconsciously, it's going to be, I feel like it's going to be a little different to see someone physically in an environment where you could definitely tell that there is real danger than just on a green screen. I feel like subconsciously you can understand that.
Yeah, and something else that I appreciate about it is that my dad was an aerospace engineer.
Yeah.
Right? So I go see movies with my dad, and he ruins them because the physics aren't right, you know? And that's all he'll talk about. Oh, that would never happen. But then he said about Maverick, he said, the physics were pretty good. They're not perfect, but they were pretty good.
Yeah.
And so I don't have, that's something else I don't have to worry about is my dad saying, oh no, that's it's terrible. Physics were all wrong.
Yeah, there are certain, my brother will do the same thing with fight scenes because he's a fighter in real life.
Yep.
And he'll say like they're not moving fast enough, or they could have ended the fight early with this. Like it doesn't have to be like, you don't have to be realistic. It's for showmanship. Just be happy with like the laser swords or the fight scenes. Just be happy with the choreography. Like, no, it's got to be like this. Like that. Why? Don't make it realistic. Realistic would be stupid.
Yeah, realistic is sometimes very boring.
Yeah,
it's like why MMO fights that are 3 seconds long nobody wants to watch.
Exactly. I mean, you can watch it for other reasons, but not in a movie. That freaking sucks.
MMA.
Oh yeah, MMA.
I said MMO. I don't know why MMA.
I don't even know what MMA stand for. What does MMO stand for? It's like
massively multiplayer online.
Massive missile occupancy.
I don't know. It's
But anyway, all that is to say, I very much enjoy this movie, and I think it's a movie that will inspire an entirely different generation in the same way that the original Top Gun inspired other people. And just like the enjoyment of the theater, I felt so giddy watching this type of movie. And I don't really like aerospace movies or movies about jets or anything like that. I just enjoyed this movie. I think it's a well-made movie, and I walked out of it just feeling so giddy and loving the movie. And I think it's going to inspire a different type of generation.
Yeah.
Similar to the original. And I think it's something it will last longer than it has any reason to last. But again, that's what I would consider to be a modern movie classic. And I know that...
Okay.
So to prep for this, and I'm just now getting into this now, what is it? Freaking 20 minutes into the discussion, we have lists of movies that we would consider to be modern movie classics.
I have 2 lists.
You have 2 lists because you over-prepared.
No, I have a list of movies that I would consider modern day classics, which is probably very different from yours.
Yeah.
I also have a list of discussion points, things that you could maybe consider for one reason or another, or maybe movies that I can see other people enjoying that I don't. Like Birdman, for instance.
Yes.
I maybe we can get into this later, but I watch movies to be entertained.
Mm-hmm.
I don't especially care about all the artistic, all the directing, although usually that adds to it. But
yeah,
Birdman is one that I heard people talk about. You know, it's great. And then I watched it. I said I was not entertained.
Yeah,
I get that some people like Birdman, but I did not. So that's that list.
I think there's a certain type of movie that's made for your enjoyment, and there are certain movies that are made to cater to Oscar types. Because you can tell, like, in the whole point of Birdman is, like, to kind of show off this one-shot. It's not the whole point, but it's definitely part of it. Like, this whole one-shot feeling that this movie was made in one continuous take, and the performances are very Oscar bait, and the way it was made is very Oscar bait. Like, you can tell this is trying to be one of those types of movies. And it's kind of a shame that the Oscars only go for those type of movies instead of, you know, movies that everyone also enjoys. Mm-hmm. But we can get into that in a minute.
Sure.
But we both have lists, and I kind of want to read our lists off first, and then we can go into discussion.
Okay.
So, on my lists, and I'm trying to be fair in my assessment, I want to include movies that have been in my own personal circle and have circulated back and forth for a very long time. But they're also movies that I would...
You mean a very short time?
I'm only 24 years old. I haven't been around that long. But I would consider to be modern movie classics, but movies that I have watched multiple times, enjoyed multiple times, and that have been circulating around my sphere for a very long time, to the point where I would consider these movies to be remembered for a very long time. So, with that, this is my very short list, and I'm not going to include any Marvel movies or major Star Wars movies just for that. And again, movies that have been made from 2010 to now. So, my list.
Okay.
Mad Max Fury Road, Prisoners, Super Dark Times,
Didn't see it.
Django Unchained,
Didn't see it.
Hereditary,
Didn't see it.
Grand Budapest Hotel,
Didn't see it.
Paddington 2, The Last Jedi, for reasons.
You said you weren't going to put Star Wars on there.
For certain Star Wars movies, I made sure to emphasize that. Top Gun Maverick, obviously. The Fighter, The Way, Way Back, and Creed 2.
Didn't see that one either.
So, that's my list. Let's see here your list, and then we'll talk about movies.
All right. I'm approaching this from a very different perspective.
Let's do it.
The Martian. I don't know how you didn't put that on your list.
Oh, we talked about this before, and I should have.
It's a forgettable movie.
What?
It's a great movie,
Yeah.
but it's one that, I don't know, I just kind of forget about. John Wick. Very
Yeah.
surprising cult classic, I would guess. A Quiet Place. The Lego Movie. Frozen.
Yes.
I know this is outside of the range, and we can discuss this one, but Avatar. Not one that I liked, but seemed to do a lot technologically. And Inception. It was pretty good.
I agree with pretty much all of it. Like, I feel like all of these movies would be considered, in a way, shape, or form, modern classics, if not cult classics. I feel like there's one or two of mine that would be considered cult classics. Not just modern movie classics.
It's a classic and it's modern.
Yeah.
If you have to stick the word cult in there, that's fine.
Yeah, that makes it sound weird now.
Yeah. Well,
If you have to stick the word cult in it, maybe it's...
John Wick, like I'd never heard of it. And then somebody said, all of a sudden, like all these people said, hey, you should see John Wick. Have you seen
Yeah.
John Wick? You should go watch John Wick.
I do like that some of these movies are not part of a series, except for Quiet Place, kind of, I guess now, and the Star Wars movie. But some of these movies just kind of came out of the woodworks. Like, John Wick had no reason to be as good as it was, and it just is for certain aspects or another. Like, the whole premise of the movie is silly. Like, it's a man who is avenging the death of his puppy.
That's true, but it's a movie that doesn't take itself overly serious.
Mm-hmm.
It's not trying to win Oscars. It's trying to entertain people. It knows its audience, and it plays to that.
100%.
It's violent and bloody and ridiculous and great.
Do you want to see headshots? There's all of them in here.
Yes.
Lots of headshots.
It's great.
Lots of freaking John Wick, Keanu Reeves being the giant man he is and just murdering people.
And even the old lady at the library, when I was checking it out, was like, John Wick is great. I would totally have not expected somebody like that to have watched and enjoyed John Wick, but there you go. It appeals to a lot of people.
A lot of people have had emotional experience because I have watched John Wick with a group of females, and all of them just got teary-eyed when the puppy died, and even I got a little like, it's a puppy, it's so adorable, but it's a puppy for a reason, because when it dies, there's going to be an emotional reaction of, you killed a puppy.
My grandmother actually, my dad recommended it to her, and she started watching it, and she turned it off. And she texted, and she said, they killed the dog. And she refused to watch any of the rest of the movie because they killed the dog.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It will elicit some kind of emotional reaction if you kill a puppy. I mean, like, what is it? Like, the worst kinds of people, like Nazis and people who kill puppies.
I don't like dogs.
Which sometimes those correlate.
Yeah, I don't like dogs, but I would never kill a dog. I make a few jokes about it, but I would never kill a dog. And like even I recognized like this is a very special relationship that just got ruined.
Yeah.
And then I get to see the aftermath of that. It's
There is. I'm sorry to bring this up, but there's a joke that I'm immediately reminded of when you said that. Like, I would never kill a dog. Well, you have kids, right?
Where are you
Hold
going?
on, I'm going somewhere. I promise.
Okay, yes, I have kids.
Yes. So there's a comedian named Tom Segura that I listen to because I listen to a lot of comedians, and he has a comedy show where one of his first jokes, and he say, "I love my kids." It's unbelievable. It's something else to say how much you love your kids, how much you adore your kids. And I love my dog as well. But my difference between my love for my kids and my love for my dog was if my dog ever hurt my kid, immediately and without question, I would drown that dog.
Fair enough, yeah.
And that joke goes on a little longer and it goes on a little darker, and I'm not going to get onto this in the podcast, but I think that's hilarious. And I'm going to go back to John Wick now because that was a really different tangent.
Yes. Batman.
But you don't need to explain that. That's
I won't explain that.
you don't have to. If you get it, you get it. But let's talk about some of the other movies on our lists. So I'll start with one of mine, then we'll kind of go back to you, and I guess we'll go back and forth with freaking that. So I feel like a lot of my movies can be justified, but I feel like two movies that people probably don't know as much are Prisoners and Super Dark Times. Prisoners maybe, because I feel like a lot of people have seen that because it has two big stars, Jake Gyllenhaal and you've never. Well, okay, so that movie has definitely circulated because of the stars and because of the performances in it, and because I think it legitimately is one of the creepiest and more disturbing movies of the past few years. Even if it's not a horror film, it's very disturbing. It's about children being kidnapped and the father's reaction to their kids being kidnapped, and then the detective's reaction to those kids being kidnapped. And then the whole... I'm not going to spoil the movie. And then their whole...
Wait, you spoil like all movies.
I do.
And TV shows.
But this one I'm not going to spoil.
Okay.
Because you haven't seen it, I want you to enjoy it. Generally...
I've watched all your podcast, well, almost all of your podcasts so far, and you've ruined... several things. So I guess now that I'm a guest, you don't want to ruin it for me.
Call me inconsistent because that's 100% what I am.
Okay.
I'm sorry, but at the same time, I'm not.
It's Larry.
It is Larry. Larry is at fault. He inspires me to do terrible things, possibly through his soulless eyes.
Is it back to Larry now, or is it?
Oh no! What have you done? It's Steve. Oh, it's Steve. It's Steve. It's Steve. It's Steve. It's Steve. I'm freaking. Why did you do this to me?
I'm making your point.
It is Steve. Mm-hmm. Man, you suck.
That's the last time I will be here. So
okay.
Nice seeing you, audience.
I can't believe I did that. Anyway, Prisoners. So that whole area of the father's reaction to his own daughter being kidnapped and the lengths that he will go to find his daughter again is an area that I like being explored. But again, it's a very interesting movie, and it feels like a very real world scenario where you're just in it to see the reaction of this terrible, terrible situation and how normal people would react to it, and to the extremes that some people would go to.
It's not like Taken, where you have this super awesome guy that does these things in a weird normal situation.
Yeah.
It's just a normal person.
Yeah, it's very much a normal person. And again, like to the extremes where someone who loves their kids and who cares for their kids and obviously doesn't want this to happen, but to the somewhat dark and extreme lengths that someone will go to find them again. And again, I like that aspect, and it's a movie that has been brought up so many times because of the performances, because of the cinematography, because of the things that happen in the movie, but also just because I feel like this is one of those darker movies that other people can very much relate to because of the subject matter of, kidnapping kids. And I don't want to say like that's like kidnapping kids. Do you relate to that? I hope you don't, because it's kidnapping kids, but a lot of people very much sympathize with it because it's a dad, and it's reacting to, like, and it's a family reacting to this horrible tragedy and the lengths that he will go to try and find them again. I feel like that's relatable for a lot of people, and it's why I feel like this is one of those movies that could be considered a classic or cult classic, in my opinion.
Yeah, and speaking as a dad, I can't imagine what I would do.
Oh yeah,
if
I mean, yeah.
I didn't even want to think about it. It's
I mean, one of my friends, Ernesto, I don't have kids, but one of the things that he told me, and you can probably attest to this, is you don't know what it's like to love someone more than yourself until you have a kid. I mean, maybe you can attest to this. Maybe you can think it's like, I mean, it's something like, I don't know what it feels like, but to have a kid and then to, lose that kid would just be a world-altering experience.
Yeah, because, you when you have a baby, you are holding something that cannot take care of itself. Mm-hmm. And it is part you. And it's hard to describe just what that means.
Right.
That you are responsible for keeping it alive. And there were nights when our oldest was born that we just kind of stared at her. Is she breathing? And they are completely helpless and reliant on you. And I don't know, it builds this relationship that just doesn't go away.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Anyway.
100%. So let's get into that's one of my movies. Let's get into one of your movies.
All right, let's start in the middle. A Quiet Place. I don't watch many horror movies. But I always thought A Quiet Place seemed like an interesting premise. And then watching it, I think I liked it more than Elizabeth because of John Krasinski and like his relationship. Like it starts with a kid dying, and it's a horrible thing. Not many movies.
See, now you're spoiling it for people who haven't seen it.
I'm sorry, spoilers. But that's the opening like 5 minutes.
It is.
It's
right.
It's not like I'm going to ruin the rest of it. But it's about a family that is trying to survive alone, and it's two parents that are having to deal with teenagers and little kids, and eventually there's a baby in the mix, and as a father, the things that he had to do to keep his family safe, he did all kinds of things, and teenagers and younger kids, they don't understand, and you watch the movie and you see what he's doing, and I'm like, that's me. My kids don't like the rules. They don't like going to bed. They don't like eating their vegetables. Well, some of the vegetables, but but kids need to do that, and adults have to make them do that, because otherwise they won't. And you kind of get some of that behind the scenes, and I won't ruin the ending, but there's some amazing things that he does as a father that I'm like, I think I would do that, or I hope I would do that.
Yeah.
And so that movie really resonated with me. And like I said, I don't watch a lot of horror movies, but that's one I've seen 3 times now. I'll probably watch it again. It was well done, well directed, well acted, interesting story, and just more normal family. A lot of my problems with some movies is you make this abnormal family, that there's all kinds of problems and things that aren't necessarily normal to me.
Yeah. I think it's one of those movies that really nails its premise. I mean, the whole premise is you can't make a noise or the monster will kill you. Mm-hmm. And the world building, the characters in it, are nailed perfectly. And it takes its premise, expands it, and makes it in an experience where it feels believable. I mean, it's believable as a monster coming down from outer space to kill you is believable, but it feels real.
Yep.
As real as that premise could be. And again, I like the fact that you brought up the relationship between the father and his kids, because again, that's kind of what that is like. Like at the core of the movie, at the heart of the movie, is the relationships between the father and the daughter and the son, and that's what makes everyone, and again, some things at the end that I won't spoil because you already spoiled the beginning because you're a hypocrite.
Just call me inconsistent.
Yeah, I know. But like those things that it makes to establish those things at the beginning makes the ending really hit home.
Yep.
And yeah, I agree with you. It's one of those movies that I feel like will be remembered for its premise and especially the execution of the premise.
Yep.
Another one of those movies because you talked about horror movies.
Mm-hmm. You started it.
What?
You started it.
So one of my other movies that I had written down, and I can go ahead and kind of correlate this with another one of my movies, is The Fighter.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess I kind of want to talk about Creed 2 on this as well, because I like those movies for two very similar reasons. I don't have Creed 1, I have Creed 2. The reason I have The Fighter down on my list is because I feel like it's one of the very rare MMA movies that's, good. I haven't seen a lot of good fighting type MMA movies. I mean, there are some out there. There's just also not a lot out there that are really good. But I feel like this movie really hits home for a lot of people because of the relationship of the two brothers in the movie. The whole premise of the movie is that there are two MMA fighters fighting for two very different reasons, and they both meet in the MMA ring at the end. And that's not a spoiler because it's the whole premise of the movie that the freaking two brothers fight at the end. And they both come from very different backgrounds, despite being brothers who grew up with the same dad and stuff like that. And they're both very different in their approach. And it's really a movie that just brings you emotionally to tears, especially for a person who has a brother and who is a fighter, by the way. And he actually, he is a fighter and is currently undefeated in his professional fighting, even though he's only had one fight, which means he's undefeated. But he is a very skilled fighter.
Yep.
And he can kick my butt. He's my younger brother, and he's more muscular than I am. So I have no problem saying that he can 100% kick my butt.
He's a fighter, you're a filmmaker,
Yeah, they're two different areas.
Yeah.
I have a shirt that says "We Film," and he has a bicep. But
you have weights over there.
Yeah, I got weights over there, but I'm not nearly like. There's a comparison with like my brother who looks the way he looks, and me like, hey. I'm not intimidating. I'm not a very intimidating person. Steve is more intimidating than I am, but he's a skull.
He's a saber-toothed tiger. He used to be a saber-toothed tiger.
He used to be. He used to be alive, but now he's dead. And now I'm more intimidating, but not really.
Poor Steve. He has big teeth.
He has really big teeth. He didn't visit the dentist. Go to the dentist or you'll end up like Steve.
Batman.
Yep. But yeah, back to The Fighter. That emotional gut punch of an ending and everything really leading up to it is really centered around family, their relationships. And again, it's one of the reasons why a lot of these movies really do resonate is because they have that premise. And again, this is based on a true story, but again, the premise is like two brothers meeting. That's the premise. It nails its premise to a point where a lot of people are going to emotionally resonate with its premise and are going to get behind it and really, really emotionally detach. Like, this is one of the this is one of the movies that I can go into and I was an emotional wreck when I saw it the first time. Like, thankfully, I was watching it in here alone with nobody here because I had to stop it and just like, I'm not a very emotional person to begin with, but like watching it like, because I could see the relationship in there and kind of project my own brother into it and see, when we were younger and had those types of similar fights, see that happen and just imagine that could be me and him. And like, it's just such a powerful film. Mm-hmm. And one of those reasons why I believe like it could be as a modern day classic. What were you going to say?
Well, I've never heard of it.
Okay, cool.
I don't remember what I was going to say.
Hopefully
I've never even heard of it until you told me about it. So
cool. Hopefully by my explanation, it is one of those movies that has circulated in my sphere, but again, maybe not. Maybe some of these movies don't circulate in your own sphere. That's fine. Yeah. They're just classics in my opinion.
Yeah, no, I get it. And when you asked me about doing modern day classics, I had to think about what movies I've seen in the last 10 years. My oldest daughter is 8. And so there's been a lot of kids movies, a lot of animated movies. And so, that's why I have Frozen and the Lego movie. But then a lot of like the artsy movies, which I don't generally enjoy to begin with.
Yeah.
I just haven't made time to watch those. So I get it.
I mean, it's not. I feel like it's not an area where a lot of people would be clamoring to go to the theater to. I mean, especially nowadays, a lot of people will go to the theater only for one specific type of movie. Like, you really have to market that movie well, and that movie you really want to have to go see to get out of your house.
If movies weren't like $50 to go see a movie, it might be nicer to go see seeing Top Gun in the theater the other day was great. But I've seen, I don't know, 2 movies in theaters in the last 5 years.
Yeah.
You know, except, well, yeah. So but I was looking at movie tickets. It's like, okay, it's like $14 plus fees, plus other fees, plus taxes. I look at that, so, well, I can just wait 2 months and watch it on Netflix or Disney Plus or whatever, and I can watch it from the comfort of my couch.
Yeah. You could have done that with, like, what is it? A good example, Eternals. Instead of going to go see that garbage in theaters, you could have just waited.
I did that. Yeah. There are some movies that you just want to see in theaters because it's this grand epic experience, and it's nice going to see a movie with other people. But not every movie is worth that.
No.
You know, especially when you can go to Best Buy and buy a movie brand new for $20.
Yeah.
And you can share it with anybody. You can watch as many times as you want. Sorry, I'm ranting about movie
Hey,
theaters. Batman. Yeah. But you also brought up Creed 2, which I haven't seen Creed 2. I saw the first Creed. But that made me, it's sort of on my other list. I said I had 2 lists, and the other list is things that I think could be talked about. And one of the problems I had with Top Gun Maverick is that it's a remake of Top Gun. And can you say that a remake is a classic, right? And in the last 10 years, there have been a lot of remakes and and sequels. You know, Disney did it with all their Beauty and the Beast and Cinderella, The Lion King, and I'm thinking these don't add anything to the original experience. Yeah, and I didn't like the new Lion King.
Nope.
But Beauty and the Beast was okay. I didn't see. I mean, it was okay. It wasn't great. It didn't add anything, but it's not like it was a bad remake.
Yeah,
I thought that The Lion King was a bad remake.
Because it just did the exact same thing with no other, with nothing else.
But all of the voices were different, and and I don't know. Maybe I have some nostalgia for The Lion King, but it just felt wrong. But I felt like the creator or the director of Top Gun understood what made Top Gun. And took it to the next level, right? They added all the adrenaline. They added a lot of the modern day styles and things, and they just made it better. And it was an enjoyable experience. And it was one of the few remakes that I can remember that is actually as good or better than the original.
100%. And there are certain movies that you consider remakes, and even though Top Gun, this movie isn't necessarily a remake, it is very tonally similar and structurally similar. Like, it opens the same, and then it kind of ends kind of very similar to the other one. Like, it's very similar, but the way obviously the story is a bit different. Maverick's older. We're now seeing a bit more of an older, weathered Maverick. Still similar personality though, but it's now a father-son or a surrogate father-son movie instead of a buddy bromance movie. You can say those things, but again, certain aspects are obviously different, but it's very much in line where you can consider, like, you don't need to see the first one. But movies that I would consider to be remakes that are legitimately improve on the original, True Grit. This isn't on my list.
I haven't seen that one,
but
I remember watching John Wayne one as a kid.
Yeah. Like True Grit, the new True Grit, which you can actually watch on Netflix now, is legitimately one of the few remakes that you would say is better than the original, in my opinion. I think the John Wayne one is good, and I like John Wayne, and I think he's cool, and I like the original, but I think it is very much inferior to the movie that came after, which is the True Grit made by the Coen brothers. And I feel like that movie captures not only like the Western mentality way better, but just in themes and characters and all of that kind of stuff, and especially the ending. and how much that differentiates from the original. It is such a more interesting and more powerful movie at the end of the day, I feel, than the original, which the original felt it's good, but it's also at the end of the day very forgettable and very generic. You could very much not distinguish that from any other Western.
It's just another John Wayne Western.
It's just another John Wayne Western. Yeah. This one feels like it is its own thing. Mm-hmm. And again, when watching Jeff Bridges, and this was the first movie I saw Haley Steinfeld in, like she plays the lead lady in that movie. I forget her name, but she stole the show in every single way possible. I know that Disney is currently obsessed with like strong female leads and stuff like that, but this is legitimately like one of the best female-led characters in a Western, and it's not because she's very powerful or like the best gunslinger, because Rooster Cogburn, played by Jeff Bridges, is the best gunslinger in the movie, and he's awesome, and he has his great epic moments, and he very much does steal the show. But Haley Steinfeld is just like a little girl in a big Western environment who's just dedicated to killing this man who killed her father.
Right.
And she betrays it instead of like an innocence and I don't really have the ability to do it, but I'm going to try anyway, that the original did. This one just has an unbridled determination for murder, but she just doesn't have the capability to do it. Like, she fires a normal pistol that Rooster holds with one hand. She has to hold both hands up to hold it and fire it, and it's like a rifle when she's firing it because she's tiny. But she's just so dedicated and so maniacally interested in murdering this person that did not come across in the original as well. Again, that's a whole rant, but I will say like that's one of the examples of remakes that I feel like improves. Again, anyway.
All right, so
Batman.
Back to remakes, though.
Yeah.
A not unpopular opinion here. The recent Star Wars trilogy.
Freaking man.
We episode 7. They took A New Hope and they tried to improve it, but it's like they didn't understand what made Star Wars Star Wars.
Man, no.
And then episode 8, I made this comparison earlier to the Marvel movies. It's very different in tone. Like, all the Marvel movies are different in tone.
Yeah.
And style. And it just feels very out of place. I won't say that it's a bad Star Wars movie. It's just, it doesn't fit. And then you've got episode 9, which again, they tried to take Star Wars and they tried to understand it and they missed the mark. And anyway, so yeah, I think episode 7, 8, and 9 are kind of like that. They're almost remakes that missed the mark.
Would you mind talking about The Last Jedi for a second?
It's your podcast. We can talk about You talk about Star Wars all the time.
Yay.
So.
I do. I talk about Star Wars more than I talk about most things, it seems like.
Okay.
But The Last Jedi has been talked about to death, but it was also on my list. And I said most Star Wars movies are not going to be on this list, obviously. But this one I feel like is a classic for very different reasons than most of the things on my list. I feel like there has been so much talk on. I'm just going to try not to repeat so many people online. Thank you. But there are so many conversations, so many videos online discussing The Last Jedi, if it's a masterpiece or if it's a bad movie, and like all of these things, dissecting it, talking about the reasons why it's a trash movie, why it disrespected the original trilogy, or why it's an underrated masterpiece, and all of these. Like, it has been talked to death.
Yes.
And I feel like that's not going to die because everyone has such a very hardcore opinion about this movie that it's one of those movies I feel like is going to continue to be in the discussion, even if it's not really a movie I feel like that deserves that type of discussion. Because in my own personal opinion, I don't think it's a good movie. But I think just because of how poorly it sits in the Star Wars mythology, I feel like that's one of the reasons why people have such a hardcore discussion about it. Because you either enjoy the differences and enjoy how indifferent it is, or you hate the fact that it exists in the same Star Wars continuity as Darth Vader. And that part sucks.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
And that makes me want to ask you a question. Like, how do you define a classic movie? And this gets you off of the discussion of The Last Jedi, but kind of the way I define a classic movie is is it a movie that I recommend that other people watch?
Right.
Right. Or, okay, I don't know if recommend is the right word. I don't want to get in trouble for recommending something. But, when I'm grown up, okay, I'm grown up now.
When I grow up.
But, is it a movie that in several years I will say, hey, you should watch that movie, or be surprised when somebody hasn't seen that movie, right? And so in 10 or 20 years, am I going to say, hey, have you seen The Last Jedi? Probably not.
That makes sense.
Have you haven't seen Frozen? What's wrong with you? Let me show you. Like all the classic movies I can think of, like The Godfather, and I know you haven't seen The Godfather.
I haven't.
But that's a movie that I kind of expect most people to have seen, or at least to know a lot of things about.
Yes.
The Last Jedi, yes. In Star Wars circles, absolutely. It's a classic movie that people will talk about in my own definition of, you should at least see it. But just in the general population, I don't see that as a classic movie.
That's interesting. I do want to go back a little bit and explain the reason I haven't seen this certain Godfather type movie.
You don't want to leave your audience just guessing as why you haven't seen The Godfather? Let them come up with their own fan fiction.
Fan fiction of why this idiot hasn't seen one.
There's fan fiction for everything everywhere. I'm sure somebody will write it.
This freaking and Batman. No, I haven't seen The Godfather. I don't want to see The Godfather for the sole reason, and it's not a good reason, for the sole reason of I love when people get angry at me for not seeing the movie. I love people's reaction when they say, "You haven't seen The Godfather?" And it's like, "Oh, feed my soul." I like it. Your anger makes me happy. I feed off the tears of your sadness. It makes me happy when you get angry that I haven't seen, and you didn't. But people have a reaction when you say, "You haven't seen The Godfather?" That's just one of those movies that if you have seen movies, it's just one of those movies that people automatically assume you saw, and especially like. For someone who is in the film community, you get a lot of very pissed off reactions from people who hold their drinks with their pinky in the air. That if you haven't seen The Godfather, there's going to be a visceral reaction, and it just makes me happy. And that particularly makes me not want to see it even more, just to continue that.
Fair enough. At least you have a good reason, and you've thought it out.
Well, you could argue that's not a good reason.
I don't know. It creates a discussion. It's a ridiculous discussion, but it creates a discussion.
It is ridiculous. Maybe I'll have a whole podcast one day on not seeing movies that people should see.
But how many times when you've said, I haven't seen The Godfather, have people tried to explain to you why you should see The Godfather?
But everyone's explanations are the same, though.
Right. And so, like, how long is it going to take before you get tired of hearing the same explanation?
Well, it's not the explanation that I love hearing. It's the enraged fury that some people have. Not everyone, but some people have to the fact that I haven't seen it. And it's just like, I love your rage. I love your rage.
I get it. I do get it.
Yeah, it's a troll mentality, but it's
we all have our things.
That's my it's not my thing, but I love that part. I love like oh, he's angry, let's spark this fire a little more.
It's why I told you the other day that I thought your opinions on Star Wars were wrong. I just wanted to just because.
Yeah, and it made me go home and rethink my life and be sad and cry, and I'm still crying. In fact, when this podcast is done, I will still cry.
And you still invited me on.
I did.
After that, which is interesting.
Because this has been a secret ambush into destroying you for your own personal opinions.
Okay. You haven't said I'm wrong yet. So.
I haven't. This is not even a discussion that's been brought up yet. Where did we leave off last?
One of the other definitions you gave for a classic movie is like technological advancements. Mm-hmm. And Avatar was prior to 2010.
It was.
But there were huge like cinematic like camera things, right? I'm not a big filmmaking person. You know more than I do, but I remember when it came out, they said that's how it was advertised.
Yeah.
Was that there were all these camera advancements, and I came out of it thinking, wow, that was a really beautiful movie that I hated. And if I never see it again, I'm fine with it. I felt like I was preached to, and that's fine. But that would match your definition, except for the fact that it came out prior to 2010.
Yes.
Of a classic movie.
It's very famous for one particular reason, and we all know the reason what that is. But I'll counter that with saying another movie that was on my list for its achievement in the technical is Mad Max Fury Road.
I haven't seen that one.
Man, you're in for it if you ever see it. But that is like Adrenaline, the movie. It is fist pump in the air. Let's go rob a liquor store. Freaking one of those movies. It is essentially like, have you ever taken heroin? I haven't, and I won't. But watch the movie, and you'll get a similar experience. It is such an adrenaline-filled, crazy town movie, and it is called Mad Max for a reason. And it is a sequel, technically, but you don't need to see the others to get the full experience. You get everything from just one. And it's the fourth movie in a series, technically, but you really don't need to see any of the others. It is a movie that once you see it, you have no idea how they did the things they did, and you have never seen anything like it. Even if you've seen the other Mad Max movies, you will never see anything like that. And I feel like a movie like this will never be made again because of how much practical elements were made in it, how many cars it took to film one scene, and all the stunts and the explosions and the things they did for real in the deserts on location, and the crazy things that went on behind the scenes. It is a crazy movie, and it is shown on screen in the best way possible, but the hows and ends of how they did it seem impossible. And you never have really seen a movie like this before, and I feel like people noticed that when it came out, and that's why it was nominated for Academy Awards, even though it's just an action movie, which I feel like that distinction is crappy, but that's a different story. And I feel like this will be one of those movies that's remembered for that specific reason, for how crazy and insane this movie is, and how there's not really another movie like it, if that makes sense.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, I haven't seen it. That does make sense. A unique movie is always interesting.
Yeah.
Right? Doesn't have to mean it's always a good movie.
No, it doesn't have to be.
But people like unique movies. It's one of my favorite movies. Maybe I shouldn't admit this, is Arlington Road, which came out a long time ago. And spoilers, stop watching now. Okay, that's enough time.
So you're fine with the audience not being spoiled, but I'm gonna get spoiled.
Okay, I can stop talking.
No, it's fine.
It's a very unique movie because the bad guy wins.
Oh.
The whole movie, you're thinking the bad guy's going to win. What is the good guy going to do to stop the bad guy? And he doesn't. The bad guy wins. And it triggers a lot of people, especially my age, now that I've kind of figured this out, because of 9/11.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Because it's bombing a building.
Yeah.
Right. So I'm not sure I recommend it, and if you want to cut this whole part out, that's fine. But it's a very unique movie because the bad guy wins.
Yeah.
And that doesn't happen. How many movies does the bad guy win? And one of the was it Endgame or is it Infinity War?
Infinity War, yeah.
There's the snap. The bad guy won, but there's a continuation where the good guys win.
Yes.
With Arlington Road, the bad guy wins, and that's the end. There is nothing else.
Mm-hmm.
So,
I feel like that initial, because there are movies out there, none that are coming to mind, to be honest with you, but there are movies out there where the bad guy does win, and you watch that movie, it's kind of a shock to your system when you're younger and you're watching movies for the first time, that's not how it's supposed to end. And you so desperately want justice to happen, because I feel like we all want justice to be served.
Yep.
It's kind of a crappy thing, oh, well, that freaking sucks.
Yep. Yeah, but this, and you definitely kind of feel like that at the end of this movie, but it's just very unique. And I remember it, and sometimes it's like, okay, the bad guy can win. That's okay. At least in the movie world, there's thousands and thousands and thousands of movies where the good guy wins. That doesn't always happen.
Yeah. It does kind of bring up an interesting point. There are quite a few mainstream movies where the bad guys do win. You could say some of the Harry Potter movies. You could say some of the Marvel only Infinity War, really. Yeah. And even kind of Empire Strikes Back or Revenge of the Sith. Mm-hmm. But all of those movies always end up to a point where Return of the Jedi happens and the good guys win. We're going to ignore the sequels because screw those things. And Infinity War Endgame happens. You were right. The good guys do win. But there are certain movies where the bad guys win, and that's freaking it. Welcome back from the edit. Something happened in between, and you'll never know what happens because you shouldn't know.
I'll know.
You'll know, but no one else will.
I won't tell
Larry
them.
will. Steve, it's freaking Steve. It has been Steve for the past several podcasts, and then you've screwed me up. I gotta start greeting him in the morning, like, "Hey, how you doing, Steve?" You suck.
Oh man, you should leave again so I can talk to Steve.
All right,
I forgot. No, it's fine.
You can talk to him and just.
No, it's
different.
It's different now that you're here.
That's now I don't want to be here.
More stuff to cut out. We were going to talk about Marvel movies.
We should continue that
conversation. I was talking to my wife about what do we consider a classic movie, and she started naming things. And one of the movies she said was The Avengers. And as the first Avengers movie in the whole Marvel lineup, it was pretty good. I don't know that it stands up on its own. And I don't know that any of them necessarily stand up on their own, but they're pretty good for a while.
You could say probably the only real Marvel movie that stands solely on its own is the first Iron Man and maybe Guardians of the Galaxy.
Maybe. But I think if you think about the Marvel movies as a TV show instead of a movie or a series of movies, it kind of changes it. But they're good, and they've been very popular for a long time. And mostly in the last 10, 15 years. I forget when Iron Man and the Incredible Hulk came out.
I feel like the 2005, I want to believe.
Yeah, something like that. But, they've kind of come to define movies recently.
Yeah.
And I think that one of the reasons that Top Gun Maverick, going backwards in time, is so good is that they learned a lot making the action movies like the Marvel movies, right? Our attention span has gotten a little shorter, and the action, the adrenaline, the effects that they've been able to figure out from doing movies like the Marvel movies really helped build the adrenaline rush that you get from Top Gun. And so I don't know that it's a classic movie, or movies in this case. And I would find it keeps getting bigger too, so it's harder to say, hey, you should go watch the Marvel movies, but you need to watch 25 of them, plus you need to watch 4 or 5 different series and growing.
Yeah. I think it's very important to talk about that, especially for the impact that it had on modern movies as of recent. I mean, the biggest movies that you see, other than Top Gun and those kinds of movies, are Marvel movies, superhero movies. And that is really where the boom started, was around that time. We've never seen a superhero team up like that before, coming from other movies and teaming up in one specific movie. That had never been done before, and that was the first time that happened, so that was a whole movie event. And going forward, obviously, because that movie was successful, it changed a lot of the way people thought about movies and about those types of superhero movies. And now every movie studio And still, every movie studio wants to create their own little cinematic universe. Sony wants to do it with their movies. DC wants to do it with their movies.
Wasn't Hasbro going to do it with their like cartoony movies?
Sure, whatever.
Or their board game movies?
Yeah,
or
their
something?
board game movie. Freaking board game. There's so many like cinematic universes now. Like there's a MonsterVerse with King Kong Godzilla. Like those movies are now a thing. Like it changed the landscape of how we make movies. But I am interested to see the long-term repercussions of it, because maybe when people grow up and these movies, like an entirely different generation comes in and watches these movies and outgrows, maybe they're not as interested as us in these types of movies, and maybe they don't want to start from Iron Man and go all the way to 50 plus movies later to see these movies, and maybe that's not something they're interested in. Maybe Marvel's going way longer than it should, and maybe they should have stopped at Endgame, and maybe that's the thing that should be the case, but it's hard to say, because
It's been so successful.
It has been so successful, but what the long-term effects of it being like this, of it continuing for longer than 22, because that was 22 movies all the way to Endgame, and that's a long investment. And you can say, like, with your comparison of TV series, we do the same thing with TV series, but these are 2-hour-long movies, and it gets more complicated. And not only does it not stop at Endgame, it continues on and gets way more complicated.
And I haven't seen Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness.
Complicated.
But just the idea of, and even in Loki, the idea that there are multiple universes where anything can happen. It's like, okay, there's the universe and the things that I know. All of a sudden, there's all these other things that I don't know, and keeping all the timelines straight and all that, just it doesn't appeal to me. So I think going forward, at least I've lost some interest in it.
Yeah.
But the storytelling up to Endgame, and even from what I've seen of the Marvels after that, has been very unique, right? DC tried to recreate it without much success, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Their movies just aren't as fun. But
I actually really like their movie. Like I feel like DC has a different distinction, and that I feel like it's sort of figured out the ways where it can succeed. It's not in making a cinematic universe, it's making their own independent good movies. And I feel like they've kind of figured that out with the past few movies, Aquaman, The Batman, and those movies have been very successful.
I didn't see those ones.
Okay, well, that's fine.
I think like up to Justice League, Batman versus Superman, all of those, like, they weren't good, and I lost interest. I also didn't really appreciate, I don't think, the Batman trilogy, right? The Batman Begins, The Dark Knight.
Oh,
Dark Knight
so
Rises.
you have another wrong opinion.
Well, like I've said, I think I like movies that entertain me.
Yeah.
And my world is dark enough. I don't need to go see a movie that is just dark and dreary.
Yeah.
And that's what those movies are. And
I feel
sure, the acting, the directing, all of that is great in those movies, but no thank you.
I feel you.
I don't want to add to the darkness of my world.
I feel you. And maybe that's why the Marvel movies are so popular, because some of them have kind of strayed from that as of recent, but a lot of those Marvel movies are just fun popcorn movies, and there's no wrong way to... There's no bad thing about that. There's no bad thing with going to a theater, turning off your brain for a bit, and just relaxing and enjoying the spectacle. There's nothing wrong with that. You could say that's kind of what Top Gun is, too.
Yeah. And I haven't seen the new Jurassic Park either, but one of the things that I love about the first Jurassic Park and the first Harry Potter, which is interesting, is this sense of wonder that you get, from when they first meet the dinosaurs, or you first see magic, right? It's this amazing experience that the characters feel and that you as the audience member feel. Yeah. And the more remakes and the darker the movie, like, the further I get away from that sense of wonder and excitement at the universe that's going on.
That isn't interesting, because I will not disagree with you because I do love the Harry Potter movies, and I do like.
And this is the first Harry Potter.
Yes.
Like after that, you are already introduced to that world. But Harry Potter in the very first movie knows nothing about magic.
Right.
And then all of a sudden he's a wizard, and he's like, "Wait, what? You're a wizard, Harry?" He's like, "What? What?"
I'm a what?
And then you go to Diagon Alley, and there's this huge just shift in color and all of that when he steps into this world of magic, and you just feel like this is awesome. There's that wonder there, and you don't get that anywhere else in the rest of the movies.
Yeah, well, you get that in I feel like the next 4, but after that it becomes it does become increasingly
dark
darker.
in 3, and 2 is a remake of 1.
Yeah, and I agree with you. It does get darker, but I like that it matures with the audience.
I love the Harry Potter movies.
Yeah.
And I get that it matures kind of like a child going to adulthood. That is fine. And I don't dislike all dark movies, but the Batman trilogy is just pretty much dark all the way through.
Yeah.
And for the most part, that's not what I want to watch.
To go back to Harry Potter for just a second,
Yeah.
I just think it's really funny to compare the first movie and the whimsical childhood fantasy elements of it, and then just compare that with the last movie, where not only is it darker, more depressing, and the color has been drained from everything, and it's so dark and dreary, and there's a humongous body count in Harry Potter. If you go back and look at everything, especially in the last one, we are eliminating cast members like it's going out of style.
Yep.
It is like we line them up and just say, okay, you're dead, you're dead, you're dead, you're dead, you're dead, you're dead. It's like, oh, all right, cool.
Yep.
As a personal fan of the darker movies, I do love the first Harry Potter movie. I do love all those Harry Potter movies. In my own opinion, I kind of enjoy that type. I feel like the story is a little more interesting and a little more complex as it goes forward, and I like those little elements that have been weaved from the first movie to the last movie and how it all pays off super well. And I love the Battle of Hogwarts, and I love Maggie Smith in that movie where she gets to wave her wand, say that spell, and an army happens, and then in that little moment where they're prepping for battle, she's always wanted to use that spell. It's so awesome.
Yep.
And Maggie Smith's the freaking best, and I love her so much.
Yeah, there's that little bit of childlike wonder for her and that character in that moment. Yeah.
But yeah, it is a humongous contrast to see the first movie, the whimsical, and and then the last movie, oh crap, why are so many people dead? What happened?
Right. Yeah. And Jurassic Park is kind of the same way, when Jurassic Park, you've got this sense of wonder when you see the dinosaurs for the first time, that there's this impossible thing that you would never ever see except in a movie. Mm-hmm. And for those characters, this is real. This is a dinosaur.
Yes.
And then you fast forward to the new Chris Pratt ones, and Jurassic World just didn't have that same sense of wonder and excitement. The world already had dinosaurs. They were already introduced to it.
Yeah.
And so it didn't have that same emotional connection with me.
Yeah.
And I think that's where Top Gun is different. I mean, Top Gun doesn't have that emotion. It has the same emotional attachment to me as maybe the original does.
Yeah.
It's not wonder like Jurassic Park and Harry Potter, which I heard they're trying to reboot. But it feels very similar.
It's a factory-like mentality where they're just producing these type of movies instead of investing in these movies.
Yep.
Jurassic Park is not going to have the same wonder as it used to from first seeing the dinosaurs, and especially with the new ones where people are literally going to a theme park of dinosaurs. There's no wonder in that. It's mainstream at that point.
Yeah.
It's not the same.
But you can still make a good sequel. You can.
You
right?
100% could.
Top Gun is a good example of somebody took the time and the effort to care and figure out what it was and make a sequel.
Right.
Now, granted, it's the same thing, but better. But they spent a lot of, it looks like they spent a lot of time understanding what made it good and moving on.
But I also believe that part of it is you need to leave well enough alone at some point.
Absolutely.
And some would say they should have stopped making sequels to this a long time ago, and they just didn't. And they're doing it because there's a factory-like mentality of we're going to pump out these movies, and these movies are going to also pump out money for us. And it's been working because these movies have been very successful.
Yeah, there's like Lost. I know people give Lost a hard time because it got lost along the way, but they had
puns.
but they had a story in mind, right? It was season 1, 2, and 5, I think, and then they inserted 3 and 4, but then they ended it, right? End it when it's time to end your story and move on. Don't think I've told my story. It made a lot of money. All right, how can I make more money?
Yeah, how can I do this again?
Yeah, how can I repeat this? Tell your story and be done to build or something.
It's not a modern mentality for movie studios because once they see a movie makes money, like, okay, we need to continue this. But for, again, I agree, a storymaker's or a storyteller's standpoint, I have a story I want to tell. I'm going to put everything and my heart and soul into this specific story. Tell it, be done with it.
Yep.
And that is a mentality for a lot of filmmakers nowadays who want to come in and not make a sequel, who want to just tell a story, and that's going to be it. That's going to be the story. That's going to be the definitive story, and there's not going to be continuing movie sequels that ruin it. Some would say with the Star Wars movies, especially like the original, you could say anything that comes after really ruins the individuality and the stories that were, like, it's not the same as it was before when it was just the original Star Wars movies, you could say. And I'm saying this as a person who enjoys the prequels. Well, I enjoy Revenge of the Sith, not the other two. But I enjoy that movie very much. But you could always say, like, if you left the Star Wars movies alone, it definitely would have felt different than it does now with everything that has happened, especially the terrible, god-awful I Hate My Life sequel movies, which can suck a left toe. All right, well, I'm going to go ahead and let it go. I can't.
No Frozen joke in your ending, okay?
I very much could make a Frozen joke.
That's fine.
But I don't want to because who's always like, we should let it go. Like, do you know what that's from? Like, yes, we all know what that's from. Steve and I like naps. Well, Steve doesn't. He's dead. But I like naps, and I'm alive.
Okay.
Naps are like the best part of my day. Anyway, thank you for coming on the podcast.
Anytime.
Appreciate having you. I promise I won't, try not to cancel on you in the next future.
You only canceled on me once. It's okay.
That's true. I'll stop feeling bad about that forever.
Yeah, don't feel bad.
I won't. But thank you for coming on and
You're welcome.
providing your lists and commentary and stuff. It was fun.
Anytime. Hopefully it was entertaining.
Maybe. We'll see.
We had fun.
We had fun.
Mm-hmm.
It depends on whoever's listening. Do you have fun? Comment down below. I don't know. What do YouTubers say?
Like and subscribe.
Dang it. All right.
It's in every YouTube video ever. Like and subscribe.
I said that on my other podcasts before, so I am one of those people now. I suck. All right, that's going to be it for this episode. And Ernesto, my dude, roll those credits.